This is True News, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help us God. I'm Rick Wiles. Well, the trouble started when a monkey hissed at Michelle Fallon. The Pennsylvania woman was driving behind a large truck when she witnessed a traffic collision involving the truck. She saw crates scattered across the highway. As she approached, she thought the crates contained cats. But as she got closer, she realized the crates were filled with monkeys. And that is when one of the monkeys spat in her face. Now she's sick. Doc Burkhart and I have more about this very unusual story.
No, this is true news, isn't it?
Yeah, this is vintage True News.
This is almost like a scene out of a science fiction movie, right?
Yeah, so
there are several movies like this.
Somewhere Fauci's face is going to pop up. You know, the dog killer, the
Yes.
puppy torturer, the man who does live experiments on orphan children. So he had a truck full of monkeys and chimpanzees. I don't know if they were monkeys or chimpanzees. The articles say monkeys, and yet I've seen some articles that had photos of chimpanzees, and I don't know if the people at the newspaper don't know the difference between monkeys and chimpanzees.
So I thought it was interesting. The story was telling me they were transporting the accident that occurred. This is WBBH TV. A trailer carrying about 100 monkeys crashed.
Okay, so there's chimpanzees.
Yeah. So these aren't the kind of animals that were on the truck. The monkeys that were on the truck were macaque monkeys. They're much smaller than this and everything.
So they didn't fact check their story, did they?
No, they just thought, hey, do we have any monkey pictures anywhere? And so they pulled this one out. We got a little bit of a scene of the crash here, and so don't have a lot of the details and everything, but apparently the truck carrying the monkeys went off the road and everything. Several of the monkeys escaped for days. They were looking for one missing monkey in particular. What caught my attention in the story was the monkeys were en route to Missouri. That was going to be their final destination, and so they were transporting them across country.
You know, most likely, you know where they came from?
Where's that?
The Caribbean islands.
Oh, really?
What I've noticed, and I haven't been to the Caribbean islands for a number of years, but particularly St. Kitts, when I used to visit there a lot, the island was full of monkeys.
Right.
And then one of the last trips I made there, I noticed there were no monkeys. And I asked someone, what happened to them? And they said, they've all been gathered up and sold to pharmaceutical laboratories in America.
Wow.
So the Nazis got them.
Well, I remember stories of people being able to see monkeys out here in the Florida Everglades and everything because I guess there were labs and they were released out in the Everglades. And of course, there's compounds for monkeys out here in our area of the state. But
we have a chimpanzee reserve nearby, the world's largest chimpanzee rescue reserve. But they're not monkeys; they're chimpanzees.
Right.
But this story, this is
interesting twist on this.
Yes, because all right. So the monkeys were being transported from a lab to another lab or something. There was an accident. You saw the trucks there, and then this woman, Michelle Fallon, who was an eyewitness to the wreck, walks up to one of the crates, and a monkey hissed and then spat in her face. Now, here's where this becomes more serious at this point. This next story, this is a TV report from a local television station in Pennsylvania who talked to this woman. Let's watch it.
All of the escaped monkeys from Friday night's bizarre crash are now accounted for, but public health concerns remain.
Yeah, the CDC is actually warning people who responded to the scene there to watch out for any symptoms. WBRE WIOU Eyewitness News I-Team reporter Caroline Forbeck joining us live in studio to explain. Caroline?
Nick, Candace, a Danville woman says she's concerned for her health after coming into close contact with a monkey on the side of the interstate. She says she never could have imagined that just trying to be a good Samaritan would lead to this.
Peeled back the cloth and when I looked down in more and it popped up some monkey.
Michelle Fallon of Danville says she just received her first dose of rabies vaccine and a round of antivirals after a monkey hissed in her face at the scene of a crash in Valley Township.
I thought I was just doing the right thing by helping. I had no idea it would turn out this way.
Fallon says on Friday she saw a truck hauling a trailer collide with a dump truck where Route 54 meets Interstate 80. She pulled over to help the driver.
He just asked if his trailer was okay. He never said that, oh, don't go, if you do come near a crate, do not touch it. If he would have told me that, then I would have been more careful.
That's when Fallon came face to face with an agitated monkey. The truck was hauling 100 monkeys from Africa headed to a lab in Missouri for testing. The 3 monkeys that escaped have since been recovered. But during the search, officials warned the public not to come near the monkeys because they could transmit disease.
I was close to the monkey. I touched the crates. I walked through their feces, so I was very close. I was inside that trailer where their monkey crates were, so I called to inquire, was I safe?
Since the monkeys were not quarantined and monitored, the CDC told Fallon she needs to take precautions because she was in close contact. According to the CDC, this species commonly spreads the bee virus through saliva, feces, or urine. Fallon says she grew concerned because she has an open cut on her hand and developed pink eye-like symptoms, so she went to the emergency room at Geisinger Danville.
Because the monkey did hiss at me, and because there was monkey feces around, and I do have an open cut, they just want to be precautious.
Fallon will be on preventative medicine for about 2 weeks. The USDA is now investigating the incident after PETA filed a complaint. The animal rights organization put out a statement today urging the U.S. to stop importing monkeys for experiments.
Okay, so the monkeys didn't come from the Caribbean, they came from Africa. And they were being taken to a lab in Missouri, not for testing, but for experiments, for Nazi-like experiments. When are we going to stop the experiments on animals?
I know that this is one of the.
It is sick.
It is one of the most tragic traits of humanity.
Absolutely sick and disgusting. You have these people like Fauci that get all excited about torturing an animal. So this woman now has pink eye, and she's wondering, is the pink eye related to her exposure to the monkeys that were on their way to a research lab? Gee, what were they going to give the monkeys? Monkeypox?
And, we don't know what the monkeys had. Even the reporter there said they're transmitters of the bee virus. I don't even know what the bee virus is. Have you ever heard of that before? And so, but one thing's for sure, this is how sci-fi movies start, right? Yes. This monkey escapes from the lab, or gets dropped off at the wrong place, or gets dropped off at a pet store, or something like that. It seems that there's no control on this, but then they're out of control in their torture on it too.
That's right.
So
that's right. It is disgusting, and only Nazis do this kind of stuff. There's a day coming. I'm telling you, Almighty God is coming here. In the book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ, it says Christ will return to destroy those who destroy the earth. And that includes his animals.
Right.
He has watched these Nazi scientists commit the most wicked experiments on innocent animals. Like Fauci tying the mouths shut of puppies. Yes. And then putting sandflies in their mouths so that they ate their tongues off.
Yes.
Fauci's a sicko, an absolute sicko.
Who even thinks up of an experiment
Fauci,
like that?
Dr. Mingala.
I'll tie up a dog and then see if sandflies will eat the flesh off its skull.
Do you know why they tied the dog's mouth shut? They removed the dog's larynx because the puppy's screams were disturbing the Nazi scientists. Okay? This is a sick, sick, sick society. And it's sick because it's without Christ. And I don't want to hear any garbage about, well, Rick, if we don't experiment on the chimpanzees and the monkeys, we won't have medicine. Well, if you wouldn't sin, you wouldn't be sick.
Right.
Okay? Sickness came from the fall of mankind. I'm not saying that everybody is sick has sin. That's not what I'm saying. Sickness is the result of man's fall. That's how we got sickness. Disease originated from the fall of Adam and Eve.
Yes.
All right? We're in a fallen world. The answer is not experiments on puppies and chimpanzees. The answer is repentance and submission to Jesus Christ. What's wrong with the world is that we don't have Christ in this world. He's available, but the world doesn't want him.
No.
They want Antichrist.
They'll submit to the Antichrist.
Yes.
They'll submit to the Antichrist policies of so-called jabs in the arm and mask and everything else, but they won't submit to Christ. Well, the Bible tells us that there's coming a day where all creation will submit to Christ.
That's right.
Whether they choose to or not, they will submit. Every knee shall bow, every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. The only difference is you have a choice right now to submit to that. So,
and all creation is groaning to be released from man's sin.
yes.
So the entire creation is groaning. God hears the groaning of his creation. See, the earth has a mouth and blood has a voice. It says so in the book of Genesis.
Yes.
The earth has a mouth, blood has a voice. And all the innocent blood that has soaked the soil is crying out to God. And that includes the blood of animals that had been tortured by these Nazi scientists in their perverted, twisted, evil laboratories, so that a handful of globalists can become super duper billionaires and have more money.
And torture more.
We'll torture more animals so that we can make more drugs and become richer and richer and richer. And then we'll release the diseases into the world and people will get sick and then they'll buy our drugs.
Yes.
That's the system. That's what they're doing. Well, anyhow, I just wanted to tell you about this story in Pennsylvania because months ago we talked about monkeypox. It's like, what?
Yes.
Why is there monkeypox in the United States? Oh, because America has Wuhan labs. That's why. We have our own Wuhan labs right here in the United States of America.
We had Wuhan labs before Wuhan had Wuhan labs.
And we paid the Chinese to have a lab in Wuhan, thanks to Fauci. Well, the next one, this is New York State. New York judge strikes down state mask mandate. Schools have mixed responses. Try to figure that one out, Doc.
So a New York judge ruled Monday that the state's mask mandate can't be enforced after it was reinstituted by Governor Kathy Hochul over concerns about a winter surge of coronavirus cases. So State Supreme Court Judge Thomas Rodemaker said in his decision that the State Department of Health, now listen to this, didn't have the legal authority to implement the mandate and that it was up to the state legislature to do so if needed. The mandate, and this is a quote from the judge, is a law that was promulgated and enacted unlawfully. Wrap your mind around that. By an executive branch state agency and therefore void and unenforceable, the judge said. Now, keep that up for just a second. So basically what the judge is saying is you created a law, but it's not a law because you can't, it was enacted unlawfully. The state health department didn't have any authority to make a law, and the governor had no authority to enforce it. Now, what is kind of scary here is the legislature could come up with a law to do that, but let's face it, they would be fighting an uphill battle
because they have to be they have to go to the voters to be elected, where the state health department is run by bureaucrats. And so what we've heard for the past year or two is people saying, it's the law, the mask mandate, the vaccine mandate, it's the law. No, it's not the law.
It's not the law.
It's a Nazi mandate written by a handful of people who are unelected. Now, it wasn't just a judge in New York, it's the state Supreme Court judge.
Yes.
You're not going to get any higher in the state of New York. The state Supreme Court judge, Thomas Rademacher, issued this ruling. But let's see how New York Governor Hochul, remember, this is the woman that replaced Cuomo, who killed 15,000 senior citizens in nursing homes. So let's see how she responded.
Well, in a statement, Hochul said, "My responsibility as governor is to protect New Yorkers throughout this public health crisis, and these measures help prevent the spread of COVID-19 and save lives. We strongly disagree with this ruling, and we are pursuing every option to reverse this immediately." Well,
you're going to reverse a state Supreme Court judge. How do you do that?
you have to take it to the Supreme Court at this point, right?
No.
You can't go any higher?
It's a state.
So they're just going to, do they take another run at it at the state court?
There is no state court higher than the Supreme Court.
So how are they going to reverse this?
She's looking for a way to defy the state Supreme Court.
Now,
because she's a Nazi and she is determined to make people wear masks to submit to her authority.
Now, a number of school districts across the state are going along with the mask mandates in spite of this ruling. And so several Long Island school districts have ditched their mask after the judge overturns mandate. But a number of schools want to keep up with it. So a New York judge ruled Monday that the state's mask mandate can't be enforced after it was reinstituted by Kathy Hochul over concerns about a winter surge of coronavirus. The New York State Department of Education issued a statement that schools must continue to follow the mask rule until the case is resolved.
The case is resolved. The state Supreme Court said it's unconstitutional.
It goes on to say the mandate is a law that was promulgated and enacted unlawfully by the executive branch agency and therefore void and unenforceable. That prompted Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman to declare that starting Tuesday, kids could go to school without masks on. However, the Department of Education released the following statement. The State Education Department understands that Nassau County Supreme Court has ruled that the Department of Health exceeded its authority in enacting the mask regulation. And so this regulation is the subject of conflicting decisions insofar as Albany County Supreme Court recently upheld the regulation in another case as well. And so they're just insistent on this, aren't they?
Democrats, the left, if a court rules against them, they go, so what?
We'll find another court.
What did Biden say when the courts were ruled against him on the mandate? He told corporations, go ahead and implement it.
Do it anyway. And that's what a number of school districts are doing now.
But the companies aren't implementing his mandate now, are they?
Right.
For a couple of weeks, it looked like maybe they would.
They're playing along.
But now they've realized this isn't going to fly because they're open to litigation from employees who would be fired for not being vaccinated. And what is going to be their legal argument in court? We were ordered by the President of the United States to do it, but a court said he couldn't do it.
Right.
That's why Starbucks backed down.
Because they
can't win in court. They'll be sued by every employee that they would fire.
And you got to know that all these governors and President Biden, everybody, they knew that this wouldn't stand up to the legal muster at some point. But they just knew that he'd give them enough time to get enough people convinced on it, right?
I think it was their plan. They're probably hoping that maybe luck would strike and they might just get a favorable court ruling. We got another story. So over the weekend, there was a big not vaccine, a protest in Washington, D.C. against the gene therapy treatments and the mandates. And one of the speakers was Robert F. Kennedy Jr., somebody that we support very much and respect. And he said some very bold things. He said the vaccine mandates are worse than the Holocaust. He said even in Hitler's Germany, you could hide in the attic like Anne Frank. In fact, we got a video from the rally with Mr. Kennedy making those remarks.
Even in Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps into Switzerland. You can hide in an attic like Anne Frank did. I visited in 1962 East Germany with my father and met people who had climbed the wall and escaped. So it was possible. Many died doing it, but it was possible. Today, the mechanisms are being put in place that will make it so none of us can run and none of us can hide. Within 5 years, we're going to see 415,000 low-orbit satellites. Bill Gates says his 65,000 satellites alone will be able to look at every square inch of the planet 24 hours a day. They're putting in 5G to harvest our data and control our behavior. Digital currency that will allow them to punish us from a distance and cut off our food supply.
So he says some really great things there,
Yes.
and nothing I disagree with in that statement. But he said a couple things that some people do disagree with there.
Well, of course. And guess who is griping and complaining and telling Robert Kennedy he has to apologize? Well, we'll go to Israel Hayam, newspaper in Israel.
Right.
RFK Jr. remarks on Anne Frank and vaccines draw condemnation. Condemnation from whom?
Well, let's see who. So anti-vaccine activist Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made deeply offensive comments when he suggested things are worse for people today than they were for Anne Frank, the teenager who died in a Nazi concentration camp after hiding with her family in a secret annex in an Amsterdam house for 2 years. Several Jewish advocacy and Holocaust remembrance groups said Monday. So,
did Robert Kennedy say anything disrespectful about Anne Frank? She was a very courageous young woman, and I didn't hear him say anything disrespectful about her.
Not at all. In fact, it seemed to me like he was lauding her. She was an example. At least she was able to hide out. We don't have a place to hide. They're looking at us from the sky. And so nothing disparaging about Anne Frank, nothing disparaging about even the Holocaust, anything like that.
He's not allowed to say it.
No, you're not allowed to.
Because he's a Gentile.
That's right.
He's Goyim. He's not allowed to say Anne Frank.
So the U.S. Holocaust Museum responded to this comment and read this, making reckless comparisons to the Holocaust. The murder of 6 million Jews for a political agenda is outrageous and deeply offensive. Those who carelessly invoke Anne Frank, the Star Badge, and the Nuremberg trials exploit history and the consequences of hate. Now hold that up for just a moment because there is so much to unpack from that. You hear a lot of people today saying that the experimental jabs that everybody's getting is a violation of the Nuremberg Code. Well, according to the Holocaust Museum, you're not allowed to use that phrase either.
You're not allowed to even think it.
Yeah.
Can't think it.
So you're not allowed to make comparisons to the Holocaust. You're not allowed to talk about Anne Frank. You're not allowed to talk about the Nuremberg Code. That's according to the
Star
US
Badge.
Holocaust.
You can't say Star Badge. See, people are comparing the Nazi Star Badge that Jews were ordered to wear. They're comparing it to the vaccine mandates.
Right.
Everything that happened in the 30s and 40s with the Nazis is exactly what's happening right now. And we have every right to make the comparisons. The difference is, I would say that what's happening now is far worse. Because in the Holocaust, 6 million Jews were killed by the Nazis. But this time, the needle Nazis may kill hundreds of millions of people. We'll find out over the next 3 years how many people die from the gene therapy injections. It could be in the hundreds of millions. They have suppressed and hidden the true death toll for the past year as the vaccine gene therapies have been injected into millions of people around the world, including children. And they are hiding the true numbers of deaths, heart attacks, strokes, paralysis. No, it is a Holocaust. And it may surpass the greatest Holocaust of all, which is the abortion of children.
Yes.
This may be even greater than the abortion Holocaust. And so Robert Kennedy had every right to say what he said. And I I'm in total agreement with what he said. But a lot of people are very angry about Robert Kennedy.
Including the ADL's Jonathan Greenblatt. So if there's ever anti-Semitism in the air, Jonathan Greenblatt can't be far behind. So he said, Robert Kennedy Jr. invoking Anne Frank's memory, because they own it, Rick, okay? Invoking Anne Frank's memory and the mass murder of Jews by the Nazis as a comparison to the U.S. government working to ensure the health of its citizens is deeply inaccurate, deeply offensive, and deeply troubling. This must stop.
So you have to accept Mr. Greenblatt's version that the gene therapy injections are the U.S. government working to ensure the health of the citizens.
Right.
Well, we don't accept that, Mr. Greenblatt. We think they're neo-Nazis. And that's why we're comparing it to the Holocaust. Because they're neo-Nazis.
Yes.
Right? It has nothing to do about the health of the people. It's about the death of the people. This is a mass killing of the human race.
And even saying needle Nazis is offensive to them because they own the Nazi word, too. Only they can label someone a Nazi.
Yeah, well, there's more truth to that than you know.
So, so what has been the fallout of this? Well, today, Times of Israel is reporting this, that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. apologizes for Anne Frank comparison at anti-vaccine rally.
And see, he said it, was it Sunday he said it or Saturday?
Sunday.
Sunday, and today's Tuesday. That's how long he could stand up against the Zionists.
Less than 72 hours.
Yes. The Robert Kennedy succumbed to the Zionist pressure and got down on his knees and asked them to forgive him for saying words that he's not allowed to speak because he's Goyim.
Right. So the United States anti-vaccine activist, and this is from Times of Israel, let's earn our words. United States anti-vaccine activist Robert F. Kennedy Jr. apologized Tuesday for suggesting things are worse for people today than they were for Anne Frank, the teenager who died in a Nazi concentration camp after hiding with her family in a secret annex in Amsterdam house for 2 years. And this is a quote from Mr. Kennedy. I apologize for my reference to Anne Frank, especially to families that suffered the Holocaust horrors, Kennedy said in a tweet Tuesday morning. My intention was to use examples of past barbarism to show the perils from new technologies of control. To the extent my remarks caused hurt, I'm truly and deeply sorry. Kennedy's wife, the actress Cheryl Hines of HBO's Curb Your Enthusiasm, distanced herself from her husband in her own tweet about 20 minutes later. She called the reference to Anne Frank reprehensible and insensitive.
So Kennedy's wife disrespected him publicly on Twitter.
Right.
We know who butters her bread.
Because she wants to continue to work in Hollywood.
In Hollywood, all right. So people don't last long. There's not a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to stand against the Zionists.
Yes.
Because if you dare act like a human being with rights and dignity, they will come after you. And most of these people collapse within 24 to 72 hours and fall on their face and apologize and retract their words. So, hey, while we're on the topic of Anne Frank, and again, she was a very courageous woman. And what happened to her was tragic, horrible. Most of you know the story of Anne Frank. But something new just was revealed, and this is appropriate time now that the ADL is making a big deal about Goyim saying Anne Frank's name, because it's off limits. If you're a Goyim, you're not allowed to say her name. But it just happens that now her name is in the news. It has nothing to do about vaccines, but it has to do with who betrayed her.
Right. This is a story that came out last week by the BBC, and it talks about the betrayal of Anne Frank and her family. And the investigation is leading us to some interesting players in this. So, this is the article, the Anne Frank betrayal suspect identified after 77 years. Well, you would think after all this time they finally have pinned it down. It was a Nazi or It was some evil person within
a German white
Hitler's
nationalist.
regime. Right.
A German white nationalist.
Yes, and so, but this new investigation has identified a suspect who may have betrayed Anne Frank and her family to the Nazis. The Jewish diarist died in a Nazi concentration camp in 1945, age 15, after 2 years in hiding. Her diary, published after her death, is the most famous first-hand account of Jewish life during the war. Now, a team, including an ex-FBI agent, said Arnold van den Berg, a Jewish figure in Amsterdam, probably gave up the Franks to save his own family. The team, made up of historians and other experts, spent 6 years using modern investigative techniques to crack this cold case. That included using computer algorithms to search for connections between many different people, something that would have taken humans thousands of hours. So van den Berg had been a member of Amsterdam's Jewish Council, and this was a body forced to implement Nazi policy in Jewish areas. It was disbanded in 1943, but its members were dispatched to concentration camps. But the team found that van den Berg was not sent to a camp and was instead living in Amsterdam as normal at the time. There was also a suggestion that a member of the Jewish Council had been feeding the Nazis information. So when van den Berg lost all his series of protections exempting him from having to go to the camps, he had to provide something valuable to the Nazis that he's had contact with to let him and his wife at that time stay safe. Former FBI agent Vince Penkoke told CBS 60 Minutes.
So the bottom line here is this retired FBI agent, in his investigation of the true story of Anne Frank, has discovered that the person who betrayed Anne Frank and revealed her whereabouts and her family hiding in the attic in Amsterdam, that person was a Jewish man who wanted to save his own hide. And he was a member of the Jewish Council, which was a government council run by the Nazis.
Yes.
So he's a collaborator.
Right.
And he betrayed Anne Frank and her family. So I'd like to hear Mr. Greenblatt. I'd like to hear his take on this.
You probably won't hear anything on this, Rick.
Of course not. Of course not. You know what it means? People are people.
Yes.
It doesn't matter about your race.
Yes.
The man betrayed Anne Frank to save his own hide.
Simple as that.
That's it. That's the story. That's the story. Hey, let's get back to the COVID hoax. And this next one is pretty disgusting news story. CBS Boston. A 31-year-old man is fighting for his life. He can't get a heart transplant until he submits to having the gene therapy drug injected into his body. So he's not sick. He doesn't have COVID. He doesn't have Omicron. He doesn't have pink eye. He just needs a heart.
That's all.
So they'll let the man die. They're going to let the man die, Doc, because he's not injected with the gene therapy.
Which could cause heart problems.
Yes. Yes. His new heart could have a stroke from the gene therapy.
Right. You've got it. You summed it up, the whole story there.
Now, I can understand it if the man had monkeypox, if he had Ebola, if he had some contagious disease that escaped from one of Fauci's laboratories.
But that's not the case here.
No, he's healthy other than he needs a heart. He doesn't have any infectious diseases. He doesn't have COVID. He doesn't have Ebola. He hasn't, if they said he had contact with a space alien and the alien transferred a space alien virus to him, and they can't let this guy in the hospital. I mean, they can't let him in the surgery room.
Right.
They got to isolate him. He's got a space alien virus. I can get that. I can understand that. Because in the surgery to put a new heart in him, the doctors and nurses would have to be wearing hazmat suits because he was exposed to a space alien that had a virus. But the man's not sick. He
Right.
just needs a heart transplant.
And
the Nazis running the hospital in Boston will let him die unless he submits to their Nazism.
And the gene therapy injection doesn't prevent infection.
Of course not.
He could still have COVID.
Has nothing to do about COVID. It has to do about submission to the needle Nazis.
Yes. So
and Frank, we need you.
So David Ferguson is speaking out passionately on behalf of his son DJ. He says the 31-year-old is fighting for his life at Brigham and Women's Hospital and in desperate need of a heart transplant. My son has gone to the edge of death to stick to his guns, and he's been pushed to the limit, Ferguson said. Family says he was at the front of the line to receive a transplant, but because he has not received the COVID-19 vaccination, he is no longer eligible according to hospital policy. Ferguson says his son refuses to get the shot. Now, Dr. Arthur Kaplan is head of medical ethics at NYU Grossman School of Medicine. He says being vaccinated is necessary for this type of procedure. Well, we'd like to hear why. So post any transplant, kidney, heart, whatever, your immune system is shut off, Kaplan said. The flu could kill you. A cold could kill you. COVID could kill you. The organs are scarce. We're not going to distribute them to someone who has a poor chance of living when others who are vaccinated have a better chance post-surgery of surviving.
No, you have a better chance of having a stroke.
Yes.
A heart attack.
Now, if this man was vaccinated or injected gene therapy, it's not going to prevent the doctors and nurses that are working on him from getting infected. They're wearing masks and gowns and gloves.
And they're
everything.
vaccinated.
And they're vaccinated. So
and doesn't the vaccine work?
Right. So if the vaccine works, why doesn't it work? So
nope,
that's all political. It's all all made up is what it is.
It's submission to the needle Nazis. Look, the Nazis came to America after World War II. The CIA brought them here.
We imported them.
And now they run America. It's just that simple. They just don't goose step like they did in Germany. They look like people like Fauci. That's what they look like. These are the Nazis, and they're in control of the United States of America. They look like bankers on Wall Street. They look like generals in the Pentagon. They look like politicians, like Wiggers in Missouri, in Mississippi, people that want to nuke other countries. We have Nazis in the United States of America. We defeated the Germans, but we didn't defeat the Nazis. We became the Nazis.
Yes, we incorporated them. So
yeah.
This is a story I caught earlier today, Rick. This is from the Independent out of the UK. So look at the headline here first, okay? So this is what everybody read. So anti-vax Olympic gold medalist Sylvester Zolony dies of COVID, age 51. Okay, so if that's all you saw, and most people only read headlines, Rick, what would you assume in this story?
Well, that guy refused to get the vaccine, and now he's dead because COVID got him.
Well, that's not the whole story. You have to dig into the story to discover this part.
Because they only write the headlines to deliver the message they want the public to see.
So this Olympic gold medalist, he had fought against vaccine mandates and everything and against the gene therapy injection. But because he wanted to continue in his sport, he allowed himself to be vaccinated. Okay, so he could continue to work as a coach. However, it was just days after that he got the jab that he contracted the virus, Rick.
Yeah, because they put it in him.
So
it's just that simple. They put it in the man's body.
But you actually have to dig down in the story to actually find this information that this Olympic gold medalist who had been
he was a vaxxed anti-vaxxer who died of COVID after getting vaxxed.
Right.
Got it?
That's right. That's it. He gave in to the pressure because of his job. And Rick, how many times you've heard that excuse from people? I had to get the jab because of my job.
Right.
I wanted to keep working in my profession, my career, whatever it might be. It was jab over job is what it was. And here's one. He chose the jab over the job.
Now he doesn't have a job.
Yes.
He's out of work. because he's dead.
And he's out of air and out of breath and everything else now.
Well, here's another one. This is from RT, Russia Today. You're not allowed to read Russia Today.
That's right. It's Russian propaganda after all. So.
A rare condition listed as possible side effect of COVID-19 shots. Of course, it's rare.
Yes. So this came up in the EU. So the EU's drug watchdog is warning of a very rare spinal cord inflammation, possibly related to the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson vaccines. Now, you have to go back in time here. Remember, it was just a few months ago where it was just rare people were having breakthrough cases.
Yes.
It was rare people were having heart issues. It was rare that people were having myocarditis. So you roll the clock back 9 months, 6 months. Now here we are. Here's another rare condition that's suddenly popping up all over the place. People having spinal cord inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So how long will it be, Rick, before we start seeing stories every day? We had a breakout of spinal cord injuries and spinal cord infections in Salt Lake City.
Caused by non-vaccinated people.
Right, because non-vaccinated people are spreading something that causes spinal cord inflammation. So you've got to dig into these stories to really kind of interpret what it is that they're attempting to do with the gene therapy injections.
Let's have some humor in the news. We'll go to Great Britain, BBC. The police are investigating the Downing Street lockdown parties. Yes, indeed. Bojo the Clown, the Prime Minister.
Bojo the Clown. So you caught me off guard on that one.
Bojo the Clown. So he had the country locked down, scaring the daylights out of the people of Great Britain about COVID and Omicron and all the stuff that was going to get them. And he's had them locked down. I don't know how long they've been locked down for about 2 years.
Until this week.
On and off, okay. So for the past couple of months, news has been dribbling out that the entire time the people were locked down and not allowed to go outside, not allowed to see their relatives, not allowed to go to the pubs, the restaurants, the theaters. But the politicians were having secret little booze parties at number 10 Downing Street.
And birthday parties and all sorts of things going on.
So, it's the same story like you have in California with Governor Newsom and having dinner while the people were locked down in California and Nancy Pelosi getting her hair done while nobody could go to a hair salon. It's just typical way the super elite act. They put their illegal, unconstitutional rules on the people, and then they just continue to live the good life secretly while nobody can see them. Once in a while, they get caught.
And when they get caught, they have to make a big deal about it and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And to say, well, we're taking action, and we're not going to let that happen again.
Yeah. So Bojo the Clown has been caught, but the comedy has gone to another level because the Metropolitan Police is now investigating a criminal investigation of parties. There's no other crime in Great Britain right now.
No.
The police, people are mugged. You got thieves that break in. Just the other day I read about an elderly couple beat to death in their home in Great Britain. Well, that's a minor problem. The Metropolitan Police.
Oh, this is high priority now.
They're investigating lockdown parties at number 10 Downing Street. We got a video here from Sky News of the police
chief, probably chief.
I don't know her title, but she's with a straight face talking about why they are investigating these horrible, illegal parties while the country was locked down.
Watch this.
I can confirm that the Met is now investigating a number of events that took place at Downing Street and Whitehall in the last 2 years in relation to potential breaches of COVID-19 regulations. My officers have assessed several other events that appear to have taken place at Downing Street and Whitehall, On the available information, these other events are assessed as not reaching the threshold for criminal investigation. Throughout the pandemic, the Met has sought to take, as I have said, a proportionate approach. I should stress that the fact that we are now investigating does not, of course, mean that fixed penalty notices will necessarily be issued in every instance and to every person involved.
All right. So,
but if you were just a restaurant cook or a truck driver in Great Britain and you violated the lockdown,
you get fined.
You go to jail.
That's right.
With or without a mask.
Yes.
It's all a circus.
So 2 things that I get out of that is that the people in authority did not believe any of their own crud that they were putting out. They didn't believe it because they were behind the scenes. They were doing what they've always done. Right. And this dog and pony show that they're rolling out now, nothing's going to happen to anybody. They're not going to throw Boris Johnson in jail for COVID parties and stuff.
No, but he's going to start a war.
That's right.
He's going to start a war.
We got to get these COVID parties off the front page. So
because
how can we do it?
People are demanding his resignation.
Right.
So Bojo the clown is going to start a war with Russia to get his. I have some words I want to say, just to get his carcass out of the trouble that he's in, okay? Right. He's in a lot of political trouble. People want him to resign. So when you're in trouble and you're a politician...
Start a war.
Start a war. And that's exactly what he's talking about doing. So the next one, this is Bojo himself, threatening Russia with the most severe economic sanctions that anybody on earth has ever seen.
Bad sanctions, super duper bad sanctions.
Really, really bad. They're going to lock down Russia.
Yes.
Lockdown. Super lockdown. Nobody will ever be able to leave Russia.
But what's significant is that here, just a couple of weeks ago, the stories were coming out that the thought of, disentangling Russia from SWIFT was off the table. Boris Johnson now has brought it back on the table and said Russia could be banned from the world's dominant international payment system if it invades Ukraine, the prime minister said. Boris Johnson said ministers were in talks with the United States about expelling Russia from the SWIFT network, a move that would effectively cut Russian banks off from the West overnight. In the Commons, Johnson said it would be a very potent weapon as he threatened severe economic sanctions heavier than anything we have done before against Russia. Now we have a soundbite from the Prime Minister where he talks about these sanctions.
Last night I held a virtual meeting with President Biden, President Macron, Chancellor Scholz, President Duda, Prime Minister Draghi, General Secretary Stoltenberg, President Michel, and President von der Leyen. We agreed that we would respond in unison to any Russian attack on Ukraine. In unison, by imposing coordinated and severe economic sanctions, heavier than anything we have done before against Russia. And we agreed on the necessity of finalising these measures as swiftly as possible in order to maximise their deterrent effect. We in the UK will not hesitate to toughen our national sanctions against Russia in response to whatever President Putin may do.
Okay. I wonder if Putin had a booze party at the Kremlin during the lockdown.
Well, Boris Johnson had at least 2 that we know about. At least 2.
Oh, Doc, you're way behind. At least 2. You're way behind. You're way behind in the number of parties.
Okay.
There's been a lot of parties. They were getting drunk the whole year. The people were locked down. They partied all the time. They're being exposed. So what are they doing right now? We got to start a war.
Yes.
We got to change the headlines right now because people are angry, so we got to make people afraid again. We had them afraid, and now they're angry. We got to do something to make them afraid. We can't scare them with Omicron anymore.
So let's scare them with a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, that'll make people scared.
Now, it's interesting in this soundbite that we heard that these sanctions that they're talking about, including perhaps taking Russia out of the SWIFT system, it seems that it has been agreed upon by these other leaders in this virtual call. Did you get that as well? Mm-hmm. So there seems to be at some point where they're actually considering taking Russia off SWIFT. And we've talked about this at length here on True News in the past. Well, coming out of the coming out of Russia today is this story. Europe won't receive Russian oil and gas if Russia disconnected from SWIFT. Now, the Vice President of the Federation Council, Nikolai Zurevlev, noted that although SWIFT is convenient and fast, it is not the only way to make money transfers in Russia. So earlier, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that the UK government is discussing with the U.S. the possibility of disconnecting Russia from SWIFT in case the country's allegedly possible invasion of Ukraine. SWIFT is a settlement system. It is a service. Therefore, if Russia is disconnected from SWIFT, then we will not receive foreign currency, but buyers, European countries in the first place, will not receive our goods, oil, gas, metals, and other important components of their imports. Do they need it? I'm not sure, Zurevlev said. And I bet he said it with a smirk on his face. Do they need it? Mm-hmm. He knows they need it. He knows they need the oil and the gas and all the other imports from Russia.
The Russians are hinting today, if Bojo persuades the allies, NATO nations, to cut off the SWIFT banking services to Russia, Russia's going to cut off the oil and gas to Europe.
And like they said, there are
what
other...
month is this?
This is January.
It's cold. It's cold in Europe.
Yes.
And no gas, no oil, people freeze to death. But as he said, there's other ways to move money. Bitcoin.
Right.
And they could just send money around in cryptocurrency.
And Russia and China have been working on an alternative for SWIFT for a very long time. So I don't think that, trying to hold that over Russia is scaring them much anymore. I don't think it had ever scared them, really. But it was going to cause pain in the past. Now, not so much.
Right. Doc, I've mentioned a couple of times that, doing this job in this ministry since 1998, I can recall reporting to the True News audience many, many years ago, Vladimir Putin warning the United States and NATO, do not put missiles and troops on our border. And I one day last week, I think I was kind of trying to guess how far back that went, and I was saying somewhere 2005, 2007, something like that.
Right.
Well, I found a story today that backs this up. So this is the national interest. Did Putin's 2007 Munich speech predict the Ukraine crisis? And yes, it did, because Putin told the West in 2007, you guys cannot control the world anymore, and we're not going to allow you to put your weapons on our doorstep. So that's what, 15 years ago?
Right. So think about 2007, the U.S. is coming off the wars in the Middle East, and it was almost like the U.S. was the world power. That was it. Mm-hmm. They were the only one that you could deal with. Well, in this article from the National Interest, an especially pointed warning came when Putin addressed the annual Munich Security Conference on March 10th in 2007. He took direct aim at the notion so popular in the U.S. during the 90s and early 2000s that the international system was unipolar and that Washington's power was unchallengeable. He said this, however, one might embellish this term. At the end of the day, it refers to one type of situation, namely one center of authority, one center of force, one center of decision-making. It is a world in which there is one master, one sovereign. He goes on to say, Putin emphatically rejected that model, implicitly referring to the U.S.-led military interventions in the Balkans and Iraq. He stated, today we are witnessing an almost uncontained hyper-use of force, military force in international relations, force that is plunging the world into an abyss of permanent conflicts. And of course, Putin continued, this is extremely dangerous. It results in the fact that no one feels safe. I want to emphasize this, no one feels safe. And so it goes on in the article, say it was when he moved on from such general observations to focus on Russia's relations with NATO. However, that Putin's objections and warnings became emphatic. NATO has put its frontline forces on our borders, although as of yet we do not react to these actions at all. NATO expansion, he stated, represents a serious provocation that reduces the level of mutual trust. And we have the right to ask, against whom is this expansion intended? And what happened to the assurances our Western partners made after the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact? So even as far back as 2007, Vladimir Putin was addressing the very issues that we're dealing with Ukraine today. Now, that article in the National Interest came out late yesterday, and they are recalling this speech that Vladimir Putin made, the warning that he put out then. We've had 15 years now to correct this situation. Yes. And even Vladimir Putin, we sat there in St. Petersburg and heard Vladimir Putin reach out his hand to Emmanuel Macron and say, we don't have to keep living like this. We don't have to keep at each other between Europe and Russia. We are European. I mean, that's what he said. I remember sitting there. Yes. We are European. Consider making Russia your defense partner, defense of Europe.
That's right. We were there. We saw it. We heard it. So, Doc, True News supporters, fans, if you were with me 15 years ago, then you would have heard me report on that speech by Putin 15 years ago, in which Putin said, right now, we're not confronting NATO. You're putting your weapons on our border. As of right now, we're not confronting you on it. So what I would have said 15 years ago is, there's coming a day that Russia is going to confront NATO. That day is now. They've reached the point of no more patience with NATO. It's been 15 years now. Warning after warning after warning. And the American people know hardly anything about it. This war is going to hit them so hard, so fast, so violent when it erupts. The American people are going to be stunned, absolutely terrified that we're in a war with Russia. But for those of us who have been paying attention, we have seen this coming for a long, long time. We have now arrived at the day that the Russians are going to draw the line and say, we've told you for 15 years, now we're going to remove your weapons because you don't listen to us, you don't respect us, and if we allow you here on our border, you'll cross our border. They know that.
Yes.
You will eventually cross our border. You have no respect for us, and you will eventually cross our border and start taking our territory. So we're going to have this war very, very soon, unless some sane people in the world intervene. You know, the German government is playing the role of mediator.
Right.
I read that today. Not only are they refusing to let the West fly weapons over their airspace, but they're now trying to mediate between Russia and NATO because they have nothing to gain in this.
No,
they have a lot to lose.
They have a lot to lose. And let's not forget, there's still nuclear missiles parked in Germany. U.S. nuclear missiles parked there.
I'll tell you somebody else that has backed out. We're seeing the first crack in NATO right now. Croatia.
Yes.
Croatia will recall all troops from NATO if there is a Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Now, in the article, it says that the Croatian authorities will recall all troops from NATO forces in Eastern Europe in case of a conflict between Russia and Ukraine, President Zoran Milanovic said on television Tuesday. As the commander-in-chief, I've been closely following statements including that NATO, not one country, not the United States, is building up its presence and sending some reconnaissance ships. We do not have any bearing on this, and we will not have anything to do with this. I guarantee this, Milanovic said. Croatia will not send any troops in case of an escalation. On the contrary, it will recall all troops to the last Croatian soldier, he promised. And this is coming from a NATO member. So
he don't want any of this. He doesn't want Croatia nuked. So Croatia's going, hey, whoa, hey, we didn't expect this to happen when we got entangled with NATO. NATO, you guys told us we were joining so that we would have peace. You've used us. You used us so that you could get closer to Russia to go to war. He's starting to understand how they got duped. And he's saying, we're out. You start that war with Russia, we're bringing back all of our troops.
So when do you think that Romania and Hungary and Poland are going to wake up to that? I mean, they are knee deep in all of this. So
maybe about when the first Russian missiles start flying.
Yeah, Poland's about chest high in it, but Romania and Hungary, they, former Soviet satellite states, and so.
I got a couple more I want to go through really quick, and we'll wrap it up here. Yonhap News in Korea, North Korea fires 2 apparent cruise missiles from land. The next one from Israel, Ynet News. Israel concerned that joint Syrian-Russian jet patrol will limit the Israeli Air Force airstrikes on Syria, a country that has not done anything to Israel but gets bombed about every week by the Israelis.
And Israel's concerned amid Syrian and Russian military jets' joint patrol on Monday along Syria's airspace and borders, including the armistice line along the Syrian border with Israel. Officials said they wondered what caused Russia's apparent policy change after it had enabled the IDF to act freely against the Iranian entrenchment on Syrian soil and even increased the attacks in recent months. At least they're admitting that they did it to halt the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force plans to establish a Hezbollah-like military presence.
It's really easy to understand why Russia changed their policy. They are now in a war mode.
Yes.
And they're expecting this war to be on multiple continents. So they're going to defend Syria against Israel. Then one final story. This is Times of Israel. Israel said holding talks with Russia over Syria standoff that may limit the air campaign.
Well, no kidding. You're going to limit your air campaign with the Russian jets in the sky. Israeli military officials are reportedly holding talks with Russian army officers to calm tensions after Moscow's defense ministry said Monday that it held a joint jet patrol with Syria along the latter's borders, including in the Golan Heights area. According to the Ynet News site, Israeli officials are struggling to understand why Russia has apparently changed its policy toward Israel after it announced such joint patrols are expected to be a regular occurrence moving forward. The report claimed, without citing a source, that Israel may limit its air campaign in Syria as a result of Russia's move, even after discussions end.
Let's not forget that Syria has Russian S-400 anti-aircraft missiles, and that can shoot down Israeli and American warplanes.
And one other thing to point out on that, notice that they're patrolling in the Golan Heights, too. Yes. Because Israel has pretty much just said, that's ours.
Well, Trump gave it to them.
Yes. And so, but now Russian and Syrian jets are patrolling the Golan Heights.
Which is Syrian territory.
Yes. And so there's a temperature change taking place here, isn't there?
Yeah, so what happens on the day that Russia shoots down Israeli warplanes over Syria? What happens when Russia shoots down American warplanes over Syria?
That's the real rub there, because we have American patrols in Israel right now.
Yes. So when the Americans are bombing the Syrian army, which is what they do, you remember years ago when we were told under Obama and then under Trump that U.S. Air Force was bombing ISIS? No, they weren't bombing ISIS. They were bombing the Syrian army. The Syrian army was killing ISIS. ISIS was armed by Israel and the United States and Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Okay. So the U.S. went in and bombed the Syrian army that was trying to kill ISIS. And then the American news organizations would report that the American military was bombing ISIS. All lies. So what happens if Russia shoots down American warplanes and Israeli warplanes flying over the airspace of Syria? It is a violation of Syria's airspace.
Right. I have another thought on this, too, in that the reason why there's the increased patrols over Syria by Russia is to prevent those planes from Israel and the U.S. to cooperate in the Ukraine.
Good point, Doc. Good point. They're going to have to take a different route to get there.
That's right. So you're going to make them work for it. So, and we know that Israel's involved in the Ukraine. We know it. They've held joint exercises a number of times. Remember that story a couple years ago where they were doing the drones, live fire drone strikes in Ukraine? That Israel was conducting that?
Wasn't it Armenia, wasn't it?
I thought it was Ukraine.
I think it was Armenia. Well, they were actually killing people to demonstrate the products.
Yes. A product demonstration.
We're not kidding you. They were actually the Israeli military, not the military, the Israeli defense contractor was actually killing people.
A live fire exercise.
Live fire with drones to demonstrate to another country the value of their drones, that they would buy them. And they were actually killing people. That's how heartless these people are. We're giving you plenty to talk about. I got some more stuff I'll save for tomorrow. I mean, it's not on this topic. I'll just come back tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to tell you some stuff that's going to drop your jaw. Thank you for watching. Please tell your friends about True News. Help us to grow, as always, and continue praying for us. I am so blessed by the people who pray for me. I got a call from one of our dear friends in Jordan over the weekend, and she let me know that she and others are intercessors for us in Jordan, and I am grateful for all of our friends around the world who pray for us and intercede for us and just provide a prayer covering for this ministry. Listen, there's always stuff happening here. We had one of our employees today in an accident, a very serious accident. Thank God he was safe. 2 weeks ago, we had another employee that was almost in a very serious accident as somebody ran a stop sign.
Yes.
And that employee had been hit and suffered serious injuries several years earlier at the same intersection when somebody ran a stop sign. Yeah, the devil is out to get us, but he can't get his hands on us because the Lord Jesus Christ has angels all around us, and he's got angels around you too. We are protected people because we're on assignment for the Lord's kingdom, and we got a job to do. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow.
God bless you.